The men shattered every table, mirror, and cabinet in Elena Marlowe's furniture showroom, yet formed a careful circle around one worn walnut chair. Mafia boss Dante Moretti arrived because the vandals had falsely used his family's name, then froze at its carved rose crest. The chair had belonged to his mother before vanishing after her murder 17 years earlier. Elena admitted a dying upholsterer had hired her to restore it by midnight. Beneath the seat, Dante found fresh red sealing tape used by a rival crew, and across the street, someone was waiting for Elena to continue. Dante released the torn lining and looked through the showroom's fractured window. A man in a grey coat stood beneath the pharmacy awning, watching without pretending otherwise. When their eyes met, the man lifted 2 fingers to his ear. "Down," Dante said. Elena did not obey quickly enough. Dante crossed the distance, caught her around the waist, and drove them behind an overturned oak sideboard as a metal bolt punched through the window frame. The shot was quiet, but the impact shook sawdust over her hair. His body covered hers for one hard second. He smelled of rain, wool, and something sharply clean beneath it. "That was not a warning," he said. I noticed. Her voice shook once, then steadied. "My assistant is in the finishing room." Dante signaled to the 2 men he had brought. Nico Vale moved toward the back hall, while Gabriel Rossi dragged a display panel across the broken entrance. Elena tried to rise. Dante's hand closed over her forearm. "If the shooter wanted the chair destroyed, he would have aimed at it, and if he wanted me dead, he had a clear shot before you arrived." Elena glanced toward the walnut chair. "He wants me frightened enough to work, and you frightened enough to stop me." The coldness in Dante's face shifted by a fraction. Not approval exactly, but attention. Nico returned with 22-year-old Maya Chen, pale but unhurt. Elena crossed the room and held her until Maya's breath slowed. Only then did Elena notice blood on Dante's cuff. The bolt had grazed the back of his hand, cutting across the edge of a black and grey tattoo. "Sit," she ordered. Gabriel stared at her. No one, apparently, ordered Dante Moretti to do anything. Elena pulled the clean rag she kept around her belt, poured mineral spirits away from one corner, and used the untouched cloth to bind his hand. Dante let her, his dark eyes fixed on her face. "You protect your employee before yourself," he said. "She trusted me to give her a safe place to learn." Elena tightened the knot. "I don't get to become someone else because men broke my windows." Something personal passed through his expression and disappeared. "My mother used to say duty was what remained, after fear took everything decorative away." It was the first thing he had offered that was not a command. Elena looked toward the chair and understood why he had come in person. "Then help me keep them from taking what she left." The power failed. Emergency lamps cast the showroom in low amber. Outside, the grey-coated watcher retreated. Gabriel tested the front door and found a steel cable looped through its handles from outside. Nico reported the alley exit chained as well. The vandals had prepared the building to become a trap once Dante entered. Elena led them through the finishing room, where a ceiling vent opened above a rolling scaffold. It was too narrow for a person, but she used it to reach the manual release for the freight door. The mechanism did not move. Someone had driven a screw through the exterior track. "There is another way out," she said, "but not with the chair." Behind a rack of wood samples was a narrow delivery passage leading into the neighboring upholstery workshop. It would take people, not furniture. Dante studied the chair, then the dark street. "They expect us to carry it out," he said. So we don't. Elena crouched beside the front stretcher. Samuel Pierce, her first teacher, had delivered the chair at 9 that morning from a hospice transport van. He had been too weak to enter, but he had gripped her wrist and repeated one instruction: restore the left rose before midnight. She had assumed illness had confused him. Now she saw that one carved petal held newer wax than the others. She warmed a palette knife over a battery lamp and eased it beneath the wax. A sliver of brass appeared inside the carving. The grey-coated watcher returned with 3 men. One raised a bottle filled with fuel. Dante did not waste time threatening men who could not hear him. He ordered Gabriel into the delivery passage with Maya, then sent Nico to the roof hatch above the finishing room. Elena refused to leave the chair. "That bottle hits the floor. This place becomes a chimney," Dante said. "The walnut is sealed in old shellac. If fire reaches it, whatever is inside the rose may warp before we can remove it. Your life is not worth a piece of brass. You don't know what it is worth. Neither do they. That is why they need my hands." For a moment, his jaw tightened. Then he took off his rain-dark overcoat and wrapped it around the chair, upholstered back. 30 seconds. Nico dropped from the roof onto the awning. The watcher turned. Dante fired one suppressed shot into the fuel bottle before it left the man's hand. Glass and gasoline burst harmlessly across the wet sidewalk. Gabriel released the neighboring workshop's security shutter from inside, giving Maya an escape. The attackers scattered toward a black sedan, but Nico had already cut behind them. He caught the gray-coated man and drove him against the hood, while the others fled. Dante's men cut the cables. Elena wheeled the chair into the finishing room, away from the gasoline fumes. Dante brought the captive inside and removed his earpiece. No police were called. Elena understood that the Moretti name carried its own machinery, illegal and efficient, but she also noticed Dante did not strike the man. "Who paid you to use my name?" Dante asked. The captive smiled through a split lip. "Belandi Red buys Belandi work." He nodded at the tape under the seat as though the answer had been waiting for them. Elena looked at the tape more closely. The outer surface was bright crimson, but adhesive had squeezed along the edge in a pale amber bead. The tape wasn't made by the Belandis. The captive's smile faltered. She fetched a lamp and a magnifier. "I restore theatrical furniture. Production crews color code everything. Belandi tape is cloth-backed and tears across the grain. This is paper tape painted red. Someone wanted it recognized without expecting anyone to test it." Dante turned to the man. "Who gave it to you?" The captive bit down. Nico seized his jaw. But too late. The man swallowed something hidden against his molar. He convulsed and collapsed. Dante knelt, checked for breath, and ordered Gabriel to call a private physician. But the poison had been chosen for speed. Within a minute, the man was dead. Elena backed into the workbench. She had seen death in hospitals, softened by sheets and families. This was intimate and deliberate. Dante stepped between her and the body without touching her. "You can still walk through that passage," he said quietly. "My people will take you somewhere safe. Samuel chose me because he knew the chair and knew my work." She forced her eyes back to the brass sliver. "If I run, whoever did this finds another restorer, one who may not notice the false tape. Or they find you tomorrow. Then make sure tomorrow belongs to us." The words hung between them. Dante removed his suit jacket and rolled his sleeves above tattooed forearms. "Tell me what you need." They moved the chair onto Elena's padded restoration platform. The carved rose was part of a decorative crest joined by hidden dowels. Ordinary pressure would snap the brittle grain. Elena mixed a small amount of alcohol and shellac solvent, softening only Samuel's newer wax. Dante held the lamp exactly where she directed. His injured hand bled through her bandage, but he did not move. Inside the petal lay a narrow brass gauge engraved with irregular notches and 3 tiny holes. It was not a key. Elena aligned it against the repeating beadwork along the chair rail. The holes marked 3 beads that were fractionally darker. "Those beads were replaced," she said. Dante touched none of them. "My mother commissioned this chair after my father died. She called it her witness chair. Family captains made their oaths while she sat in it. Why would an upholsterer have it?" Samuel Pierce repaired furniture at the Moretti house. He disappeared the week after she was killed. Elena's breath caught. Samuel had trained her 10 years later under a different name, never speaking about New York. Gabriel returned with worse news. The dead attacker carried a burner phone containing one unsent message. "The Don is inside. Begin the vote." Dante checked his watch. The Moretti captains were gathering at midnight to decide whether he had violated the peace with the Belandis. Someone had staged the showroom attack to make that charge believable. The chair was not merely evidence from the past. It was the reason the trap had been sprung tonight. Dante moved them to a shuttered cabinet-making warehouse owned by an old Moretti ally. Elena insisted on bringing Maya, who refused to abandon her after the attack. The chair traveled upright in Elena's padded van. Strapped exactly as she directed, Gabriel drove. Dante sat opposite Elena in the cargo bay, one hand braced beside the chair whenever the van turned. At 9:18 p.m., they reached the warehouse. Rain hammered the skylights. Elena's tools had survived because the vandals ignored a locked steel chest bolted beneath her workbench. Maya had carried it through the passage. That detail disturbed Elena. The attackers had destroyed retail pieces, but preserved everything needed to open the chair. They knew my shop, she said. Maya went still. A man came in last week asking about antique joinery. Silver hair. Expensive coat, he said. His wife had inherited a French desk. Dante showed her photographs on his phone. Maya pointed to Lorenzo Moretti, Dante's uncle and consigliere. Dante's face remained controlled, but the tattooed hand holding the phone closed until the bandage darkened. Lorenzo had raised him after Isabella Moretti's murder. Accusing him on one frightened witness's memory would fracture the family before the vote, exactly what the conspirator wanted. We prove what he did, Elena said, or we say nothing yet. You think? I need restraint, explain to me. I think you need someone in this room who isn't afraid to explain it. Maya found a reason to inventory clamps on the other side of the warehouse. Dante approached until Elena could see rain caught in his black hair and fatigue beneath his eyes. Lorenzo taught me never to make a decision while wounded, he said. He meant emotionally. He was less concerned about blood. Elena replaced the bandage on his hand. He watched her fingers, not her face. Samuel taught me that damage tells you how an object was used. A chair worn evenly was loved. A desk, gouged in one corner, belonged to someone who always reached for the same drawer in anger. People leave themselves behind. And what have I left? She examined the deep wear on his silver watchband and the fine sawdust embedded in his cuff from shielding her. You hold on too tightly, but not always to the wrong things. His gaze lifted. The silence changed, becoming warmer and more dangerous than the room. They returned to the chair. The three replaced beads, released narrow wooden pins when pressed in the order indicated by the brass gauge. A panel beneath the rear rail opened, revealing an empty cavity lined with faded green felt. Someone had already removed its contents. Elena's certainty cracked. She had led them to nothing. Dante did not blame her. He studied scrape marks at the cavity's edge. Fresh, no, at least several years old. She ran one finger along the felt, but Samuel knew it was empty. The wax over the brass was new. He wanted us to open this first. Maya noticed shallow indentations in the felt, a long rectangle and a circle. Whatever had been stored there had left shapes. Elena dusted the surface with graphite, used for fitting joints, then pressed archival tissue over it. The impression revealed part of a stamped maker's emblem, a compass. Inside a square, she recognized it. Samuel had stamped that symbol beneath every piece he restored, along with a job number written in a private ledger. His records will tell us when he opened this compartment and what he removed, Elena said. The hospice informed them that Samuel Pierce had died at 8:52 p.m. His personal effects had been collected 9 minutes later by a man claiming to be his nephew. Samuel had no surviving family. Elena closed her eyes. Grief came with anger braided through it. Samuel had spent his last strength putting danger into her hands, but he had also trusted her to understand. Dante placed his uninjured hand beside hers on the chair rail, close enough to offer contact without imposing it. Elena turned her palm upward. He took it. We find the ledger, he said. Maya interrupted from the loading office computer. The warehouse alarm showed a service override entered with a Moretti master code. Lorenzo was not coming to negotiate. He was coming to erase the chair, the restorer, and the nephew he had raised. The master code opened the outer gate, but not the warehouse mechanical fire doors. Elena knew the building because she had once rented its spray booth. She and Maya lowered 2 steel partitions, dividing the wide floor into 3 chambers. Dante's men killed the lights and moved the chair into the central sanding room. 4 attackers entered through the loading bay. They carried suppressed pistols and respirators, expecting solvent fumes and fire. Lorenzo had planned to burn the warehouse, then call it an accident caused by Elena's restoration chemicals. Dante waited until the men passed the first fire door. Gabriel dropped it behind them. Nico opened a dust collection damper, filling the loading chamber with harmless but blinding wood flour. The attackers fired at shadows. Dante disarmed the first man. Gabriel struck the second. A bullet grazed Nico's shoulder before Maya slammed the second partition, isolating the remaining pair. Elena heard boots in the sanding room and realized the attackers had obtained an old floor plan. One passage no longer appeared on current records. A lumber slot beneath the west wall, once used to slide long boards between rooms. It was too small for a person, but wide enough for an arm and a gun. She saw the muzzle before Dante did. Elena shoved the chair sideways. The shot tore through its upholstered back and buried itself in a workbench. Dante pulled her behind a planer and fired toward the slot. Forcing the attacker away, the chair struck the concrete floor. One rear leg split along an old repair. Elena stared at the break. Samuel had taught her that a genuine fracture followed the wood grain. This one opened across it, revealing a seam filled with walnut-colored resin. "He hid something in the leg," she whispered. Dante's mouth was near her ear. "Can you remove it? Not while people are shooting at us." "Good. I was worried you had no limitations." Despite everything, a breath of laughter escaped her. Dante looked at her as though the sound had reached somewhere no weapon could. The fight ended when Nico circled through the finishing duct and forced the last attackers to surrender. One carried a Moretti security badge issued to Lorenzo's office. The other had a vial of accelerant blended to mimic Elena's lacquer thinner. It was a connection, not yet proof that Lorenzo had ordered murder. Dante wanted Elena moved to his fortified townhouse. She refused until Nico's wound was dressed, and Maya was sent to Elena's sister outside the city with independent protection. Dante accepted both conditions. He did not call them unreasonable, and he did not use her fear to command her. At 10:27 p.m., they reached the townhouse. The chair was carried to a stone-floored library. Elena examined the broken leg under better light. Removing the resin too quickly would destroy what lay inside. She set a warming pad to soften it gradually. Dante stood at the window, speaking to captains who demanded he appear at the midnight council. Lorenzo was already there, presenting photographs of Belandi-marked men outside Elena's ruined showroom. He claimed Dante had attacked a civilian business to retrieve a chair linked to secret negotiations. When the call ended, Dante poured 2 glasses of water. "My captains believe strength means arriving with an answer, even a false one. Furniture survives because joints allow movement," Elena said. "Make them too rigid, and the wood splits when seasons change. Are you comparing my family to a cabinet?" "A badly maintained one." He almost smiled, but restraint held. He handed her the water. "My mother would have liked you." Elena looked at the bullet hole through Isabella's chair. Samuel knew the risk. Why did he wait 17 years because I was 19 when she died? Lorenzo became regent at 21. I took control, but half the family still answered to him. Samuel may have believed any truth he offered would simply get me killed. The resin softened. Elena used a dental pick to lift it in translucent curls. Inside the leg was a brass cylinder no longer than her little finger. It contained a tightly rolled strip of onion skin paper, covered in Isabella Moretti's handwriting. The first line read, "If my son is hearing this from Lorenzo, then I failed." The library door opened. Lorenzo Moretti walked in alone. No alarm had sounded. Lorenzo had used the private entrance reserved for blood relatives, a privilege Dante had never revoked. He was 61, silver-haired, immaculate, and apparently unarmed. His gaze moved from the broken chair to the paper in Elena's hand. "You always did choose difficult women," he told Dante. "You never met the others," Dante said. "I met their fear." Lorenzo closed the door. "Miss Marlowe, you have mistaken an old woman as paranoia for history. Give me the paper, and I will rebuild your store twice over." Elena placed it beneath her palm on the work table. "You sent men to destroy work that took other people months to afford. You tried to burn Maya and me alive. You don't understand what rebuilding means." Lorenzo's politeness thinned. Samuel understood eventually. Dante moved without visible haste, placing himself between them. "Did you kill him?" "Cancer did. I merely shortened his opportunity to speak. It was not a confession to murder." And Lorenzo knew it. He claimed he had come to prevent a civil war. Isabella's note, he said, had been written during a period of illness and suspicion. If Dante carried it into the council, the captains would divide. Belandi soldiers would take Moretti territory before dawn. "Then why fake their tape?" Elena asked. For the first time, Lorenzo looked surprised. Dante saw it. You expected the chair to contain the note. I expected nothing. I came because my nephew is destroying himself over a dead woman's furniture. Elena lifted the onion skin with tweezers. The writing was not a full account. Isabella described moving the record of winter payments from the chair to the place Samuel made beautiful from damage. The rest was a warning. Lorenzo had sold access to a Moretti arms route, then arranged her death when she learned. The decisive record was elsewhere. Lorenzo stepped back. Midnight, Dante, attend the council. Or lose your seat by absence. Bring that scrap, and they will laugh before they vote. He left through the same private entrance. Dante did not stop him. Elena waited until the door shut. You let him go. If I detain him now, his loyal captains call it a coup, and the Bellandis advance. He wants me to choose rage. Dante looked at Isabella's handwriting for 17 years. I believed her last argument with him was about my recklessness. I apologized to him at her grave for making his guardianship harder. Elena heard the boy inside the controlled man. She did not tell him none of it was his fault. Easy absolution would insult the weight he had carried. Instead, she said, he built your guilt because it made a good lock. Dante's eyes met hers. Locks can be opened, she continued, but not by pretending the door was never there. His restraint broke only enough for his forehead to touch hers. He waited, giving her room to step away. Elena stayed. The kiss was brief, fierce, and unexpectedly tender at its end. When they separated, danger remained, but it no longer stood between them. The place Samuel made beautiful from damage, Dante said. Your showroom? Too recent. Samuel restored hundreds of pieces. Elena thought of his private maker's mark and job ledger. The hospice said someone took his effects. But Samuel never kept his real ledger at home. He told me records should live where fire and thieves find nothing worth stealing. She remembered the battered workbench at the community trade school, where Samuel had taught evening classes. Its top was built from scarred pieces salvaged after a workshop fire. He had made damage beautiful, and he had personally repaired it. The school was 20 minutes away, in clear weather, 30 in rain. They had 72 minutes before midnight. Dante called Nico, who confirmed Lorenzo had placed men at the council and at Elena's showroom, but none at the trade school. Lorenzo did not know the second hiding place. That ignorance was their only advantage. As they prepared to leave, Elena's phone rang from an unknown number. Maya whispered that the protection car had been forced off the road. She and Elena's sister were hiding in a closed laundromat while men searched the block. Lorenzo had found another lock for Elena's obedience. Elena gave Maya one instruction: pull the laundromat's fire alarm and move only when the street filled with witnesses. Dante divided his force. Gabriel took 2 cars toward the laundromat while Nico, his wounded shoulder strapped, drove Dante and Elena to the trade school. You should go to your sister, Dante said. Lorenzo wants me to abandon the record. Gabriel can reach them faster from the east side. I would only add another person he has to protect. You are not a burden to be counted then. Don't account me, trust my decision. Dante held her gaze, then called Gabriel and ordered him to follow Elena's plan. It cost him something to surrender control while people he cared about were threatened. Elena recognized the proof for what it was. At 10:58 p.m., the school's custodian let them in after Elena identified herself. The old furniture classroom smelled of wax and dry pine. Samuel's workbench stood beneath a bank of dark windows, its top a mosaic of scorched maple, cherry, and walnut. Elena had spent 3 years beside it learning to read grain, sharpen blades, and admit when a repair could not be made invisible. She searched with purpose, not chance. Samuel always marked concealed repairs with the compass and square emblem. Beneath the bench, 7 repaired patches bore his stamp. 6 carried ordinary job numbers. The 7th repeated the 3-notch sequence from the brass gauge. Elena removed 4 screws and lifted a scorched walnut patch. Inside lay Samuel's narrow ledger and an old microcassette sealed in waxed cloth. The ledger recorded Isabella's chair under its original job number. It also listed payments. Lorenzo had routed through a furniture import company used to move weapons without Dante's knowledge. The cassette, however, required authentication and context. They had 34 minutes left. Headlights swept the windows. Lorenzo's men had tracked Nico's car, not the hiding place. Dante killed the classroom lights. Elena knew the school's layout, but not its current security changes. When she tried a rear stairwell, a new electronic lock blocked it. Her assumption cost them their clean escape. "My mistake," she said. "The renovation changed this door. Then we adapt." Dante answered, without accusation. The men entered through the lobby. Dante could hold the corridor, but gunfire in a school would bring police and delay the council. Elena opened the lumber cage and selected 2 long rolling racks. They loaded them with unstable stacks of foam and empty crates, then released them down the sloped materials hallway. The crashing racks did not injure anyone, but forced the attackers into the auditorium wing. Nico broke the glass over the stairwell's mechanical release. They reached the roof, crossed a covered bridge to the adjoining automotive building, and descended through its garage. One attacker intercepted Elena beside a training vehicle. She struck his wrist with a wooden marking gauge, but he caught her hair and dragged her backward. Dante was too far away. Elena dropped her weight, drove the heel of her boot into the attacker's shin, and used the open car door as leverage to wrench free. Nico finished the fight. Elena's scalp burned. Her knee was bruised, and she did not pretend otherwise. She limped when they reached the car. Gabriel called. Maya's alarm plan had worked. Fire engines and bystanders crowded the block, forcing Lorenzo's men to withdraw. Elena's sister was safe, but Gabriel had captured one vehicle. Its navigation history included the showroom, the warehouse, and Lorenzo's private club. They had connection, route, and records. But the captains would still call them manufactured unless the cassette supplied a voice they recognized. Dante started the engine. The council house has an analog recorder. My mother required every oath to be archived. Then that is where we play it. If Lorenzo controls the doors, entering could start the war he wants. Elena held up the ledger. Then Dante enter as a man taking power. Enter as a son returning property to the family. For the first time that night, Dante did not merely protect her plan. He placed his authority behind it before they left the garage. Elena opened Samuel's ledger again. Several pages listed scholarships paid anonymously for students who could not afford tools. Her own name appeared beside the first payment. Dated 10 years earlier, Samuel had not merely chosen her because she possessed the right skill. He had quietly made that skill possible, then waited until she had built a life strong enough to survive the truth he carried. The discovery hurt more than the danger. Elena sat on the cold running board of the car and pressed her fist to her mouth. Dante crouched before her, despite the seconds draining away. "He should have told me," she said. "Perhaps he wanted one part of your life untouched by mine. Instead, he turned my shop into the place they attacked." Yes, Dante did not defend a dead man simply because Samuel had helped them. He trusted your ability and stole your right to understand the risk. Both things are true. Elena lowered her hand. That answer mattered. Dante could honor loyalty without turning it into innocence, the distinction he had failed to make with Lorenzo for 17 years. She removed Samuel's old brass marking gauge from her tool roll and set it beside his name in the ledger. When this is over, the scholarship continues. But students will know where the money comes from and what it asks of them. Dante nodded. "I will fund it without contract. I didn't ask you to. You attendees." "No. I am learning to offer before I arrange." Elena kissed him once, quickly, beneath the harsh garage light. "Keep learning." The Moretti council house occupied the upper floor of an old social club, neutral ground, maintained by retired soldiers from every faction. At 11:41 p.m., black cars lined the rain-slick street. Dante ordered his men to holster their weapons and remain outside. Elena carried Samuel's ledger in a plain restoration case. Nico carried the cassette and Isabella's note. Lorenzo's guards blocked the marble stairs. Dante did not threaten them. He invoked an older family rule. Any object used to witness a captain's oath could be presented before a succession vote. The rule had not been used in decades. But the retired keeper of the house remembered Isabella's chair and opened the doors. Inside, 12 captains sat around a long table. Lorenzo occupied the chair at Dante's right, acting as though nothing had happened. Belandi representative Carlo Vescari stood near the fireplace, furious over the staged attack done in his family's colors. Dante placed the broken walnut chair at the head of the room. Elena saw recognition pass among the older captains. The title's untouched object had become a witness again. Lorenzo rose. "My nephew brings a civilian into a family judgment while Belandi men mass at our borders. A civilian whose livelihood you destroyed," Dante said. "She will speak because you made her work part of this war." Elena explained only what her expertise could support: the false red tape, the new wax, the hidden gauge, the altered beads, the old empty cavity, the resin seam in the chair leg, and Samuel S. maker mark on the trade school workbench. She did not claim the ledger was true because she wanted it to be. She showed how each discovery caused the next. Lorenzo attacked the chain. Samuel was dead. The captive was dead. A restorer could fabricate marks and papers. Two captains murmured agreement. Elena opened Samuel's ledger to an entry from 17 years earlier. The paper bore water damage matching a flood documented at the trade school. Ink crossed the damage rather than lying beneath it, proving the entry had been written after the flood but long before tonight. Beside it was the import company, S-stamped receipt number. Carlo Vescari produced Belandi records showing his family had seized a Moretti shipment bearing that same number 17 years ago. Isabella had discovered Lorenzo selling route access to rivals, but the Belandis had preserved the record as leverage. The alliance in the room shifted. Lorenzo's planted tape had invited the very corroboration he feared. Still, he remained calm. Business misconduct is not murder. Isabella was killed by a Belandi gunman. Everyone here knows it. Nico placed the microcassette into the council recorder. Static filled the room, followed by Samuel S. Younger voice identifying the date and the chair repair. Then Isabella spoke. Her voice was controlled, tired, unmistakable to the older men. She described confronting Lorenzo about the sold route. She said he had threatened Dante unless she transferred Regency authority to him. The recording ended before she named who would kill her. It proved motive and coercion, not the murder order. Lorenzo spread his hands. A dead sister's accusation, recorded by a frightened craftsman. Tragic. Insufficient. Elena realized Samuel had hidden the cassette separately from the paper because the objects were never meant to stand alone. The brass gauge, 3 holes had opened the chair, but its irregular notches had not yet been used. She laid the gauge against the ledger's fore-edge, the notches aligned with 3-page depths. On those pages, Samuel had recorded unrelated restoration jobs, each for a captain now sitting in the room. The delivery dates formed the week of Isabella's death. One entry had been erased so carefully that only compressed paper fibers remained. "I need angled light and 10 minutes, Elena said. Lorenzo glanced at the clock. 11 minutes remained before midnight. Then the Building S, retired keeper, locked the council doors from the inside and announced that no vote would occur until the witness chair had finished speaking. Elena placed the erased page beneath a low lamp and raked light across it. Pencil graphite would contaminate the paper, so she used no trick beyond magnification and patient angles. The pressure marks revealed a surname, a delivery address, and the outline of a sum. Captain Owen Marchetti recognized the address as a safe house once controlled by his brother Paul, the gunman blamed for Isabella's death. Paul had died in prison, insisting he had been hired through an intermediary. Owen had dismissed him as a liar to preserve the family peace. Lorenzo moved toward the fireplace. Dante stepped into his path. "Sit down," Dante said. "You still have no order from me." "No, but now we know where Samuel delivered the repaired chair 3 days before my mother died." The ledger entry showed Samuel had been called to the safe house to fix a desk damaged during an argument. He had recorded the desk's owner as El Moretti and noted a broken voice recording drawer. Samuel must have found Isabella's cassette there afterward and hidden it in her chair. The chain tightened, yet it still did not prove Lorenzo had paid Paul. Owen said the prison had returned Paul's effects to him. Among them was a sealed letter he had never opened because accepting it felt like betraying Isabella. Lorenzo's composure finally changed. "That letter was examined by police," he said too quickly. Owen stared. "No one here knew I had it." The adversarial mistake was small and devastating. Lorenzo knew about an object that had never entered evidence. He had intercepted Paul S. prison mail through a bribed clerk. But one letter had been delivered after the clerk was dismissed. Owen ordered his son to retrieve it from a safe downstairs. Lorenzo drew a slim pistol from an ankle holster and seized Elena. Pressing the barrel beneath her ribs, the room erupted. But Dante raised one hand. His face became terrifyingly still. "Let her go. Withdraw your claim before the vote," Lorenzo said. "Name me regent for 5 years and she walks out." The offer exposed the objective beneath every lie. Not survival, but restored control of the family and its roots. Lorenzo backed toward a service door. Elena felt his grip tremble. He was watching Dante, not her, still certain the nephew he had trained would sacrifice anything personal to retain power. Elena also saw the service door's lower hinge. Its pin had risen 1/2 inch, loosened by years of swelling wood, and forced closing, the heavy door opened toward them. She shifted her bruised knee as if it had buckled. Lorenzo tightened his arm. "Stand." Elena hooked the toe of her boot behind the raised hinge pin and kicked downward. The pin dropped free, the door sagged off its upper hinge and slammed into Lorenzo's shoulder. His pistol turned away. Dante crossed the distance, caught Elena with one arm, and drove Lorenzo to the floor with the other. The weapon skidded beneath the table. Carlo Vescari kicked it away. Dante could have killed his uncle. Everyone in the room expected it. Instead, he pinned Lorenzo's wrist and looked at the captains. He wanted rage because rage leaves no record. Dante said, "We keep the record." Owen's son returned with Paul's letter. The seal was intact. Owen opened it himself and read aloud. Paul named Lorenzo's intermediary, described the payment schedule, and apologized for shooting Isabella after Lorenzo threatened Paul's children. The dates matched the winter payments in Samuel's ledger. Bellandi's shipment records independently matched the transferred funds. The proof was no longer one miraculous object. It was a chain preserved by people who had each held only one part. The clock passed midnight without a vote. Lorenzo's loyal captains lowered their eyes. Under council law, they stripped him of authority pending judgment by the families he had endangered. Dante surrendered control of the evidence copies to 3 neutral keepers, preventing any faction from burying them. Elena stood beside the damaged chair, shaking now that survival no longer required steadiness. Dante approached but did not touch her until she nodded. Then he wrapped his coat around her and held her while the family chose truth over the man who had taught them fear. Dawn found Elena at a private clinic with a bruised knee, a strained scalp, and no injury that required more than rest. Nico's shoulder had been stitched. Maya and Elena's sister arrived under Gabriel's escort. Furious, exhausted, and alive, Elena held them both until the terror of the night had somewhere to go. Dante remained at the council house to prevent reprisals by morning. Carlo Vescari agreed to withdraw Bellandi's soldiers in exchange for a neutral audit of the disputed route. 2 Moretti captains who had supported Lorenzo surrendered their crews rather than begin a civil war. Lorenzo's bribed prison clerk and the surviving showroom attackers were identified through the captured vehicle and the club's payment records. Consequences did not arrive as one clean victory. Elena's showroom was still destroyed. 3 customer commissions were beyond repair. Insurance would not cover damage tied to organized crime without a long investigation. Samuel was dead, and no revelation could return the years Dante had spent loving the man who betrayed his mother. At noon, Dante came to the clinic. He wore the same black trousers and open-collar shirt, sleeves lowered over dried blood and dust. His expression was controlled, but exhaustion roughened his voice. "Lorenzo asked to speak with me," he said. "Did you?" "No, not yet. I wanted my first choice after the council to belong to me." "Not him." He placed Elena's battered tool roll on the bed. Gabriel had recovered it from the trade school. Every chisel was present. "You came here first," she said. "Yes, it was not a grand declaration. It was better. A costly ordering of priorities from a man who had always placed the family machine before himself." Elena touched the bandage she had tied around his hand hours earlier. "What happens to the chair? That depends on its restorer. The back can be reupholstered. The leg needs a visible butterfly joint, because hiding the break would weaken it. The bullet hole should remain." "Why?" "Because restoration isn't erasure. The honest repair tells people what survived. Dante looked at her for a long moment, and us. Elena felt the force of wanting him, and the equal force of protecting the life she had built without him. I want to become another room in your house that you lock for safety. My business stays mine. Mayor stays out of family work. No protection that watches me without my knowledge. No decisions about my danger made behind my back. Agreed, you answered too quickly. I spent 17 years learning what secret protection becomes. He sat beside her, careful of her knee. I will make mistakes, but I want to call control, love. Elena took his hand. Then ask me properly. Will you allow me to court you when you are not under attack, trapped in a warehouse, or holding evidence against my uncle? That leaves very little of our relationship. The corner of his mouth nearly moved. I can be inventive. Yes, she said. You may try. Before he left, Dante handed her ownership documents for the cabinet-making warehouse. Elena's expression hardened. I said, my business stays mine. It does. The warehouse is not a gift. He showed her a purchase contract. The Moretti family damaged your property while acting through Lorenzo. This is restitution approved by the council. Valued against documented losses. You may accept the building, demand cash, or reject both, and sue every captain who enabled him. He had given her choices, including one that would publicly cost his family. Elena chose the warehouse because its spray booth, loading bay, and classrooms could employ the apprentices Samuel had once taught. She signed only after her lawyer reviewed the terms. That evening, Dante finally visited Lorenzo. He did not seek an apology. He informed his uncle that Isabella's chair would return to the council house after restoration and stand at every future oath. Lorenzo would live to see the family remember accurately. Lorenzo tried one last weapon. He told Dante that Isabella had planned to send her son away, that she had considered him too impulsive to inherit, and that every sacrifice Lorenzo made had preserved the throne Dante now judged him from. Dante listened until the old pattern became visible, a fragment of truth fitted into a structure of control. Isabella had wanted Dante away from the city for 1 year because she feared Lorenzo, not because she had rejected her son. Her recording and dated letters made that clear. You taught me that love must be proved by obedience, Dante said. She taught me duty could survive fear. Elena taught me neither lesson requires a cage. He left without asking Lorenzo to understand. The refusal denied his uncle the final authority of granting closure. When Dante emerged, Elena waited in the corridor by choice, not command. He stopped before her, the grief in his eyes restrained but no longer hidden. She opened her arms. This time, he was the one who accepted shelter. 6 months later, the new Marlowe Restoration Workshop opened in the converted warehouse. Elena kept the old scorch marks on Samuel's workbench and mounted his compass and square emblem above the tool cabinet, without words beneath it. Maya became a paid apprentice with authority to refuse any commission. 2 trade school students joined them, 3 afternoons a week. Elena did not replace the ruined showroom with a polished imitation. The front gallery displayed repaired furniture beside small photographs of its damage. Customers saw cracked veneers, worn arms, and joints strengthened rather than disguised. The work became known for honesty. Isabella's chair stood at the center on opening night. Elena had restored its walnut crest and fitted a dark butterfly joint across the broken rear leg. She replaced the torn upholstery with deep green velvet based on fibers found beneath a protected seam. The bullet hole remained visible in the back rail, its splintered edges stabilized but unhidden. Beneath the seat, a new compartment held certified copies of Isabella recording, Samuel's relevant ledger pages, and Paul Marchetti's letter. 3 neutral council keepers held the originals. Dante arrived after the public guests had gone. At 34, he still carried command in every step, broad-shouldered in a midnight blue suit, with black and gray tattoos visible above his open collar and across his hands. He had brought no guards inside. Gabriel waited in a car across the street because Elena knew and had agreed. You missed the speeches, she said, deliberately. Why? Tonight belonged to your work. The Moretti family had changed, though not magically. Dante submitted route decisions to a council with rotating neutral oversight. 2 captains resigned. Lorenzo awaited trial within the Underworld Council and faced separate prosecution for the bribed clerks as crimes. Dante did not become harmless, and Elena never asked him to pretend his world was clean. She asked for truth about the choices that could reach her door. He had kept that promise, even when it cost him. 3 weeks earlier, he had cancelled a weekend with her because a territorial negotiation turned dangerous. He told her why, accepted her anger, and did not send men to shadow her afterward. Elena, in return, stopped treating independence as the refusal of all help when a supplier threatened Maya. She called Dante, then stood beside him while they chose a lawful contract action instead of intimidation. Their romance grew in ordinary hours the conspiracy had nearly stolen. Coffee on the warehouse steps, arguments about the ugly chairs Dante preferred, silent evenings when Elena sketched joints while he read reports. Attraction remained dangerous, but trust arrived through repetition. Dante walked around Isabella's chair and stopped at the visible repair. You made the break part of its strength. The joint crosses damaged grain and carries the strain into sound wood. Another comparison to my family. You relearning. He placed a small walnut box on the workbench. Elena raised an eyebrow. No hidden compartments, he said. I checked. Inside was not a ring. It was the original brass maker plate from Isabella's chair, cleaned but not polished. Dante had obtained council approval for Elena to keep it. My mother chose the rose crest, he said. Samuel protected what she knew. You gave it a future neither of them could. I thought this belonged with you. Elena closed her fingers around the cool brass. Thank you. He looked toward the gallery doors. The council wants the chair tomorrow. It's ready, and after we deliver it, I want to take you somewhere without gunfire, hidden records, or dying upholsterers. That is suspiciously specific. Dinner in public. You may leave whenever you choose. Elena stepped close and adjusted the open collar of his shirt, though it needed no adjustment. I chose you months ago. Dante, freedom doesn't mean choosing only once. It means you keep giving me reasons to choose again. His hand settled at her waist, waiting there until she leaned into him. Their kiss was slow, no longer stolen from a deadline. The next afternoon, Elena and Dante carried Isabella's chair into the council house together. The captains rose, not for the Don alone, and not because a weapon had ordered them, but because the chair represented a truth ordinary craftsmanship had preserved when powerful men tried to destroy it. Before Dante took his place, he asked Elena to sit in the chair and inspect its balance. One final time she lowered herself onto the green velvet. The repaired leg held firm. Around her, men who once dismissed civilians waited for the furniture store owner's judgment. Elena pressed one palm to the restored rose crest and looked at Dante. It will hold, she said. Dante understood she meant more than the chair. He offered his hand, not to pull her up, but to walk beside her when she chose to rise. Elena took it.